The woman knelt beside her, tentatively reaching for a trowel. "Do you think I could learn to do this? To build something new?" Naomi smiled, handing her a small columbine plant with delicate flowers that had evolved to thrive in coastal winds. "We're all wildflowers at heart," she said, guiding the woman's hands as they created space in the soil. "Sometimes we just need to find the right conditions to bloom." Golden Illusions, Naomi Reed arranged the last sunflower in the bouquet with gentle precision, stepping back to admire her work in the morning light that streamed through her small flower shop's windows. At 32, she had built Bloom and Wild from nothing but student loans and determination. The shop wasn't glamorous, tucked between a laundromat and a deli in Portland, but it was hers. "That's stunning," her assistant Penny remarked, sliding a cup of coffee across the workbench. "For the Harrison wedding?" "Yes, just finishing the sample before their final decision," Naomi said, brushing pollen from her apron. "They're torn between sunflowers and peonies." The bell above the door chimed, and both women turned. The man who entered seemed oddly out of place against the backdrop of humble flower buckets and handwritten price tags. His tailored charcoal suit probably cost more than Naomi's monthly rent, his watch gleaming discreetly at his wrist. "I need flowers," he announced, glancing around with curious interest rather than the usual male panic of last-minute gift shopping. "You've come to the right place," Naomi smiled. "What's the occasion?" "A business launch. Something that says success, but not arrogance. Creative, but not chaotic." His eyes met hers. "I'm Julian, by the way. Julian Westwood," the name registered immediately. Westwood Technologies had recently become Portland's first unicorn startup, valued at over $1 billion after developing an AI platform that revolutionized medical diagnostics. His face had been on local business magazines for months. "Naomi Reed," she replied, extending a hand that was slightly dirt-stained from the morning's work. "I can create something unique for your event." Julian didn't seem to notice or mind the dirt. His handshake was firm, his smile genuine. "Perfect. My assistant would typically handle this, but I was driving by and saw your shop. Something about the name spoke to me." For the next hour, they discussed concepts, with Julian showing surprising knowledge about flower symbolism. He wasn't the cold tech genius the magazines portrayed. He was thoughtful, occasionally funny, and paid attention to details in a way that impressed her. "Why don't you come to the launch?" he suggested as she wrote up the order. "See how your creations look in their final setting." Naomi hesitated. "I usually just deliver and set up." "Consider it quality control," Julian insisted. "Plus, I could use someone real to talk to among all the investors and tech journalists." 3 days later, Naomi found herself in a converted warehouse space that had been transformed into an elegant venue. Her arrangements, modern sculptures of birds of paradise, protea, and silver dollar eucalyptus, dotted the space strategically. Feeling out of place in her only cocktail dress, she was about to slip out after checking her work when Julian appeared at her side. "They're perfect," he said, handing her a glass of champagne. "Everyone's asking who did them." Throughout the evening, Julian kept returning to her, introducing her to people as the artist who captured our company's spirit. By the end of the night, she had 3 potential new clients and a dinner invitation from Julian. Their first date turned into a second, then a third. Julian was attentive in a way no one had ever been, remembering details from their conversations, sending morning texts that showed he'd been thinking about her. When online business publications began featuring photos of Tech's golden boy and the flower girl, the attention was jarring but not entirely unwelcome. "Don't read the comments," Julian advised, kissing her temple as they scrolled through an article. "They're just jealous that I found someone authentic in a world of social climbers." 6 months later, as they walked along the beach near his cliffside home, Julian dropped to one knee. The ring caught the sunset's glow, a pink diamond surrounded by smaller white ones. "You've brought color into my world," he said, voice uncharacteristically nervous. "Marry me, Naomi." She said yes through happy tears, believing she'd found something rare and beautiful, never suspecting that beneath the golden surface lay carefully crafted illusions that would soon crumble in her hands. Crystals and champagne. The Santorini sun cast a golden glow across the whitewashed terraces of Celestial Villa, transforming the already breathtaking venue into something otherworldly. Naomi stood before the floor-length mirror in the bridal suite, barely recognizing herself in the custom Vera Wang gown that flowed like liquid pearl around her figure. 8 months had passed since Julian's proposal, 8 months of whirlwind planning, magazine features, and adjusting to a life where private jets and five-star hotels had somehow become normal. "You look like something from a fairy tale," whispered Penny, now her maid of honor, carefully adjusting the cathedral-length veil. "I still can't believe this is happening to you. Sometimes..." Neither could Naomi. The florist from Portland, who once counted pennies for rent, was now marrying one of America's most eligible bachelors on a Greek island. With 200 guests, including tech moguls, Hollywood celebrities, and even a European Princess Julian had met at a charity gala. "Is it too much?" Naomi asked softly, touching the diamond-encrusted headpiece that had been Julian's little pre-wedding. "Surprise! Sometimes I feel like I'm wearing someone else's life." "It's exactly enough," came a voice from the doorway. Naomi turned to see Cecilia Westwood, Julian's elegant mother, who had initially received her with cool assessment, but had gradually warmed over engagement dinners and wedding planning sessions. "Julian has everything money can buy. What he never had was someone who sees him, not his fortune. That's why he chose you." The ceremony unfolded like a dream sequence. String quartet playing as Naomi walked down an aisle lined with thousands of white orchids and blue delphiniums, the Aegean Sea providing a spectacular backdrop. Julian's eyes filled with tears when he saw her, making her heart swell. Despite the opulence surrounding them, that moment felt genuine, intimate. "I promise to be your harbor in every storm," Julian vowed, his voice steady as he slid the platinum band onto her finger. "To choose you every day above all else." The reception that followed was extravagant beyond imagination. A 10-course dinner crafted by a Michelin-starred chef, crystals suspended from olive trees to create the illusion of stars, performers flown in from Cirque du Soleil providing entertainment. Fashion bloggers documented every detail, from the hand-painted place cards to the gold-dusted wedding cake. "Smile," Julian whispered, pulling her close as another photographer approached. "Tomorrow's headlines need to capture how happy we are." Naomi obliged, though the constant camera flashes had begun to wear on her. She'd never sought fame, had never imagined her wedding as a media spectacle. But seeing Julian's genuine delight as he proudly introduced her as "my wife" to each guest made the intrusions worthwhile. "Dance with me, Mrs. Westwood," he said after the formal dances concluded, leading her to a quiet corner of the terrace as guests mingled below. In the relative privacy, he held her close, humming along to the distant music. "Are you happy, my flower girl?" "Deliriously," she answered truthfully, resting her head against his chest. "Though I wouldn't mind sneaking away from all this soon," Julian chuckled, his hand tracing patterns against her back. "Just a little longer for appearances. Then we have 2 weeks in the Maldives completely off the grid. No phones, no assistants, no investors. Just us." Later that night, in the honeymoon suite overlooking the caldera, Naomi curled against her husband's sleeping form, watching moonlight play across his features. For all the glamour of their wedding, this quiet moment felt like the true beginning of their marriage. Peaceful, intimate, real. She fell asleep counting blessings, blissfully unaware that the fairy tale had an expiration date already set in motion. The Maldives was paradise incarnate, their private overwater villa accessible only by boat, turquoise waters teeming with colorful fish, just below their bedroom floor's glass panels. Julian was attentive, playful, passionate. Yet occasionally, Naomi noticed him glancing reflexively at his wrist where his smartwatch would normally be, as though phantom notifications still called him. On their 5th day, despite promises of being unreachable, a staff member appeared with a satellite phone. "Emergency call for Mr. Westwood," the young man explained apologetically. Julian took the call in the bathroom, voice too low for Naomi to hear. When he emerged, his expression was a careful mask of regret. "The Singapore deal is faltering. I need to go to Hong Kong for 48 hours, 72 max. Our honeymoon? Naomi couldn't hide her disappointment. I wouldn't go if it weren't critical, he insisted, already packing. This deal represents everything we've built toward. Stay, enjoy the villa. I'll be back before you know it. He left the following morning, promising to make it up to her. Naomi spent 3 lonely days snorkeling, reading, and trying not to feel abandoned. When Julian returned, he brought rare black pearls and renewed attention, and the incident faded against the backdrop of paradise restored. They returned to reality, moving into Julian's modernist mansion overlooking the Pacific, settling into married life. If Julian worked late more often than expected, if business trips seemed to multiply rather than decrease as promised during their engagement, Naomi channeled her energy into transforming their house into a home and opening a small, exclusive floral design studio catering to high-end clients. She was happy, she told herself. Their life together was just beginning. The occasional doubts that flickered at the edges of her consciousness were merely adjustment pains to her new reality. Nothing more. Shattered reflections. 3 months into their marriage, Julian announced another business trip, Tokyo this time, for a major technology conference where he would be the keynote speaker. 5 days, he promised, kissing her goodbye at their private hangar. I'll call every night. Naomi spent the first evening reviewing designs for a gallery opening, the second hosting a dinner for Cecilia and some charity board members. On the third day, while searching for a particular vase in Julian's home office, she accidentally knocked over a stack of mail on his desk. As she gathered the scattered envelopes, a bank statement caught her eye, not from their joint accounts, but from an unfamiliar private bank. The envelope had already been opened, and as she slid the statement back inside, she glimpsed monthly transfers of $25,000 to someone named Valentina Reyes. The name meant nothing to her, and Naomi tried to dismiss it as business-related. Julian had countless investments and projects, yet something about the regularity of the payments, the same day each month for the past 18 months, left her uneasy. That night, Julian missed their scheduled call, sending a brief text about back-to-back meetings. Naomi stared at her ceiling until dawn, trying to ignore the growing knot in her stomach. The next morning, an email arrived from an anonymous address. The subject line read simply, "You deserve to know." Her finger hovered over the delete button, spam, surely, or perhaps a journalist fishing for gossip. But something made her click instead. "Your husband has been living a double life," the message began. "Valentina isn't a business associate." Attached were dozens of photos, Julian and a striking woman with copper hair entering an apartment building in San Francisco, the same woman wearing jewelry Naomi recognized from Julian's business gift purchases. Screenshots of text messages where Julian called Valentina my love and promised to figure things out after the wedding pressure dies down. The most recent photo was time-stamped 2 days ago. Not Tokyo, but San Francisco. Julian and Valentina dining at an intimate restaurant, his hand covering hers on the table. Naomi's world collapsed inward. She sat motionless for hours, examining every photo, reading every message, each one another nail in the coffin of her marriage. The anonymous sender had included the address of an apartment in San Francisco's Russian Hill. Neighborhood, property records attached, showed Julian had purchased it 14 months ago through a shell company. When her phone rang with Julian's familiar tone, she answered with unnatural calm. "How's Tokyo?" A pause. "Busy but productive. The keynote went well." "That's wonderful," Naomi replied, her voice distant even to her own ears. "When exactly do you return?" "I'm planning something special. Sunday evening, around 8. He sounded pleased, oblivious to the shattered woman on the other end of the line. "Perfect. Enjoy your final days in Tokyo. I love you." The words tasted like ash. After hanging up, Naomi made 2 calls, first to her lawyer friend from before her life with Julian, then to a private investigator recommended by the lawyer. By nightfall, she had confirmation. Julian's jet had never flown to Tokyo. Instead, it had remained at a private airfield near San Francisco all week. The apartment on Russian Hill was registered to a shell corporation owned by Julian, and the PI had observed the copper-haired woman coming and going freely, using her own key. Valentina Reyes, age 27, was a former model turned interior designer who had met Julian at a tech conference after-party 18 months ago, while he and Naomi were already dating. The monthly payments had begun immediately afterward. Sunday arrived with cruel sunlight streaming through windows that now felt like borders of a beautiful prison. Naomi arranged everything with precision. Printouts of the photos, bank statements, property records, and the PI's report laid out on the dining table. A single suitcase waited by the door, containing only what she had brought into the marriage. Julian arrived home with a bouquet of exotic flowers and a small gift box. His smile faltering when he saw her sitting in the dimly lit dining room, face composed but eyes hollow. "Naomi, what's wrong? Why are you sitting in the dark? How is Tokyo?" she asked quietly, pushing the evidence toward him as he approached. His expression shifted. First confusion, then shock, finally settling into something like resigned defeat. He didn't deny it, didn't try to claim the photos were fake or the evidence planted. Instead, he sank into the chair opposite her. "I never meant to hurt you, yet here we are." Her voice remained steady, though her hands trembled beneath the table. 18 months, Julian. Our entire relationship. It's complicated, he began, running a hand through his hair. I loved you both in different ways. She was part of my life before you. I couldn't just cut her off. So you married me while maintaining her as what? Your backup? Your mistress? Julian leaned forward, eyes pleading. I thought once we were married, I could figure things out. I do love you, Naomi. That was never a lie. Love doesn't behave like this, she said, rising from her chair. The man I thought I married doesn't exist. He's just another product you sold. To me, to the public, to yourself. We can work through this, he insisted, reaching for her hand. Couples therapy, a fresh start somewhere new. I'll end things with Valentina. I choose you. Naomi looked at him with newfound clarity. You don't get to choose anymore. I'm choosing myself. She walked out that night, leaving behind the rings, the designer clothes, everything that tied her to the beautiful lie. The media frenzy that followed was brutal, tabloids speculating wildly, business publications questioning Julian's judgment, social media divided between those pitying the flower girl and others suggesting she should have known better than to believe a billionaire could be faithful. Through it all, Naomi maintained her silence, retreating to a small coastal town where Penny had helped her secure a modest rental house. There, surrounded by the constant sound of waves, she began the painful process of excavating herself from the rubble of who she'd become in Julian's orbit, searching for the woman she'd been before, and perhaps someone stronger, wiser, who might emerge from the devastation. Thorns and new soil. The cottage in Oceanside wasn't much. Weathered cedar siding, windows that stuck in humid weather, a garden overtaken by salal and wild roses. But it was 1,000 miles from Portland, further still from the life Naomi had shared with Julian, and the anonymity of the small coastal town proved a blessed relief after months of tabloid scrutiny. For the first weeks, she barely left the property, spending long hours sitting on the back porch watching waves crash against the shore. The divorce proceedings continued through lawyers. Julian had offered a generous settlement that would ensure financial comfort for life, but Naomi requested only enough to restart her business and the return of her personal belongings from before their marriage. You're entitled to half his assets, her lawyer had insisted during a phone consultation. At minimum, the prenup guarantees $20 million. I don't want anything connected to the lie, Naomi had replied firmly. Just what's fair for the time he took from me. On her darkest days, shame threatened to drown her. Not just the humiliation of public betrayal, but deeper self-recrimination. How had she not seen the signs? Had she been so dazzled by Julian's wealth and attention that she'd willfully ignored red flags? The business trips that multiplied after their engagement. The calls that always came from hotel rooms, never public spaces where background noise might reveal his true location. His insistence on separate phones for personal and business use. One rainy afternoon, while clearing brambles from what had once been a garden, Naomi found herself talking to the plants as she worked, something she'd done in her shop before Julian. "You poor things, struggling to thrive in the wrong conditions." I know exactly how that feels. The simple act of working with her hands, reconnecting with growing things, awakened something she'd suppressed during her time as Julian's wife. In his world of technology and finance, her passion for flowers had become quaint, decorative, like she herself had been. A lovely accessory to his success story. Impulsively, she drove to the nearest garden center, returning with trays of seedlings, bags of compost, and basic tools. For the first time since discovering Julian's betrayal, she felt a flicker of purpose. The garden became her therapy. Each weed pulled, each bed turned, a small reclamation of agency. As weeks passed, locals began to notice the transformation of the neglected cottage. Neighbors stopped by with plant divisions and gardening advice. Eleanor, the 70-something owner of the town's only bookshop, brought over tea and stayed to help plant lavender along the front path. "You have healing hands?" Eleanor observed, watching Naomi gently settle a struggling hydrangea into better soil. "Plants respond to you. They're honest," Naomi replied. "They show you exactly what they need if you pay attention." Eleanor studied her thoughtfully. "The community center's looking for someone to teach a gardening workshop. Nothing fancy, just basics for beginners. Might be a good way to meet people who aren't asking questions about your past." The suggestion terrified and tempted Naomi in equal measure. The idea of standing before strangers, being seen again after months of hiding, made her palms sweat. Yet the thought of sharing something genuine, something that had always been hers rather than part of Julian's world, awakened longing. Her first workshop, simple container gardens for small spaces, attracted 8 participants, mostly retirees and a few young mothers. Naomi's hand shook as she demonstrated potting techniques, her voice initially unsteady as she explained drainage requirements. But the simple act of working with plants centered her, and by the session's end, she felt a forgotten lightness. "You should do this again," encouraged Donna, a retired nurse who had asked thoughtful questions throughout. "Maybe something about plants for emotional well-being? My daughter's going through divorce. Gardening's the only thing keeping her sane." The comment sparked something in Naomi, a recognition of her own journey through soil and growth. She began researching horticultural therapy, learning how specific plants and gardening activities could address emotional states from grief to anxiety. Her second workshop, Garden Therapy, Healing Through Growth, filled quickly, then spawned a waiting list. Many participants were women in transition, divorce, career changes, empty nests, each seeking rooting in shifting soil. "When we deadhead flowers," Naomi explained during one session, demonstrating on a leggy geranium, "we're not just making the plant prettier. We're redirecting energy from what's finished to what's possible. The plant can't hold on to the faded blooms and create new ones simultaneously. Neither can we." The workshops evolved into a series, then a small business, Resilient Gardens. Naomi developed specialized programs, container gardening for apartment dwellers, native plant restoration for ecological healing, sensory gardens for processing trauma. Local therapists began referring clients. A regional magazine featured her work, carefully respecting her privacy regarding her past. 6 months into her new venture, Naomi received a call from a women's shelter in Portland. "We've heard about your garden therapy program," the director explained. "Many of our residents are rebuilding after abusive relationships. Would you consider bringing your workshop here?" The request terrified her. Portland held too many memories, too much potential for recognition. Yet something about helping women who'd survived different but equally devastating betrayals called to her. "I can't promise, but I'll think about it," she answered honestly. That evening, walking along the beach at sunset, Naomi realized how far she'd come from the broken woman who'd arrived in Oceanside. The pain hadn't vanished. Occasionally, she still woke from dreams where Julian loved only her, where their life together had been real, but its edges had softened, composted into something that could nourish new growth. She called the shelter back the next morning. "I'll come," she said, "but I need you to understand. I'm not just teaching them about plants. I'm showing them how to transplant themselves into better soil. The Portland workshop became monthly, then expanded to other shelters and community centers throughout the Pacific Northwest. Naomi developed a curriculum combining practical gardening skills with metaphors for emotional healing, pruning as boundary setting, companion planting as healthy relationships, seasonal cycles as permission to rest and renew. A year after leaving Julian, Naomi signed the lease on a small storefront in Oceanside, part garden center, part therapy space, with a sunny classroom for workshops and private sessions. She named it simply Wild Root, a celebration of growth that happens not despite hardship, but through it. On opening day, as she arranged pots of resilient coastal natives in the front window, Naomi caught her reflection in the glass. The woman looking back at her wasn't the wide-eyed florist who'd fallen for Julian's charm, nor the polished society wife she'd become. This woman's eyes held hard-earned wisdom, her hands confidently dirt-stained, her smile authentic rather than camera-ready. For the first time since walking away from her marriage, Naomi felt genuinely grateful for the journey. The pain had been necessary compost for who she was becoming, someone far stronger, more authentic, and more deeply rooted than Julian's perfect bride could ever have been. The woman knelt beside her, tentatively reaching for a trowel. "Do you think I could learn to do this? To build something new?" Naomi smiled, handing her a small columbine plant with delicate flowers that had evolved to thrive in coastal winds. "We're all wildflowers at heart," she said, guiding the woman's hands as they created space in the soil. "Sometimes we just need to find the right conditions to bloom,